Yeah.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Bruchim Habayim, we're continuing on Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, Hilchot Shabbat, Siman Resh Nun Dalet. We're starting Seif Hey, Daf Kaf Hey, Amud Bet of the regular Prince of Mishna Berura. And the general discussion has been what you can and what you cannot put next to the source of heat right before Shabbat, going into Shabbat. Right. So last time we discussed fruits that are edible raw, how you can put them, but you can't tamper with it afterwards to hasten the process of cooking. Now we're going to speak about baking items. Right. You want to make pat. You want to make bread. Can I stick the dough inside the tanur right before Shabbat or not? How much before Shabbat can I do it? So it says the Shulchan Aruch, you cannot put dough inside the tanur unless you have enough time that the outer side of the bread is going to be baked. It's going to be darkened. The process of baking has properly started. Hamedubakin betanur, right? This is actually a machloket exactly. When you say paneha, what exactly is paneha? So here, the Shulchan Aruch says is paneha medubakin betanur, is the outer layer which is stuck to the inner side of tanur. Now it's different a little bit the way we have it, the way they had it. We have them on trays and so on. Back then, they would stick it inside the tanur, and the two sides of it, one is facing, it would be down most of the time because the tanur was like this, right? So you stick it in, it's facing the fire, and the other one is facing the actual tanur, which is sometimes upper, sometimes lower. But that side, that face that is stuck to the tanur, obviously is attached not to the fire but to the hot surface of the inner lining of the oven, perhaps hotter than the other side, but nevertheless, says the Shulchan Aruch, velo harara al gabe gehalim. You also can't put a different type of bread that they would make would be harara, with dough that they would put on top of hot coals. It will burn on the outside. That's why it's called harara. It's burnt, but different type of bread. And that would be, if we're putting it on gehalim, so that would be the side that is facing the fire. So it says the Mishna Berura, this is already before sundown, before Shkia. Because if it's already this level of baking, you're not concerned about it. It's going to finish on its own very quickly. It's going to be fine. Acharonim say, well, if it's really the same both ways. It's going to be if the outer layer also has become nikram, has baked enough to be this level of baking, that's also sufficient. Now it depends how your tanur is made, how much fire you have, what's hotter. The outside is the outer that's exposed to fire is hotter, or the side that is stuck to the tanur. Either way, each side of it, if one side is baked enough that is considered kadesh yikremu panav halachically, that is sufficient. Now, we're going to have a Ramah that's going to explain this, and I'm going to read it. I left it for now. It says, "V'chol sheporsah Ve'en chutin nimshachin karui krimat panim. Krimat panim means it is baked enough that it's not doughy anymore, that when you piece the thing apart from each other, it's not like pizza that you have the strings of dough pulling from each other. It just cuts, when you put it. So that if the face of it has been baked enough that it's going to just come apart easily without pulling away strings of dough, that already is considered baked enough. That would be mutar. So it says, the Mishna Berura, this, of course, is talking about the case that you can stoke the fire, which means there's coals there. If the source of heat is completely covered, you can't tamper with it, you can't touch it, you can't hire it, you can't stoke it, then it will be fine. אבל בקירה או בתנור שלנו, שהוא גרוף וכתום, in our tanurim, says the Chafetz Chaim, or in kira, which is considered garuf katum, or if you seal and lock the door of the tanur, you stick the bread in, and 2 seconds later you shut the door closed, you seal the door with clay, whatever they did, that would be fine also, because we're not choshesh that you're going to now come to break the seal, to open it, to stoke the fire. Mutar letempat betanur samach l'shkia bekol gavni. Fine. Now, says the Rama further, upashtida upladin sarich shikrimu panea lemala ulmata. This is only for bread, but for pashtida, which needs more cooking, you need it to be on top and on the bottom, baked this level of ikrimu panea, v'yitbashel ma shebetocha kemachal ben derosai. And usually the pashtida back in the day meant that you had meat inside, right? Because potato was not a thing. Potato is an Americanish chiddush, right? Actually, it's very interesting talking about potatoes. The Chochmat Adam was the Mechutanim of the Vilna Gaon. He writes that this thing that came, potatoes, are awesome. They're the best thing. They're considered delicacies. He's talking about halachot at bishul akum. If it's considered oler shulchan melachim, it's considered a delicacy. Only the rich people, only the fancy people have it, and so on. Because that's when it just had made it to Europe. But then less than 100 years later, in Aruch HaShulchan, right, Rabbi Michael Epstein, he writes, who eats potatoes? It's not Oleh al Shulchan Melachim at all. It's Mutar Bishul Akum, because only the peasants eat it. Right? As it says. Why? Because within this 80, 90 years, they took potatoes. It's a very tough food that in tougher climate it could survive. So they planted half of Eastern Europe with potatoes. So that's all they ate. So that became a thing. But nevertheless, now you have like a potato knish. Back then, knish meant meat knish. So it also has to be enough that the meat or the potato, whatever is inside, is cooked k'machal ben derosai. So it really depends. If you fill in the dough with already fried meat that's already well done, so then you only need kiddush yikremu paneh lemala or lemata, and you're good to go. But if the meat was not cooked before, so then you need also the meat to be ready. Fine. Says the Mishna Berura, well, the Chafetz Chaim discusses over here different types of dough and the machloket between the Vilna Gaon and the Magen Avraham, whether or not, according to Maran earlier on, over here you need how much of baking you need to be done. I encourage people to read this Mishna Berura, Seif Katan Chaftet, on their own. It's important, but a little bit of complicated, and therefore we're just going to leave that for you to do. והתבשל מה שבתוכה, היינו מה שממלאים בפשטידה בשר. You put meat inside the pashtida, you put sometimes fish, other things. That has to be also cooked enough that it's already edible before sundown, before shkiyat hachama. Fine. Now says the Shulchan Aruch further, Maran writes, "Ve'im natan otam samuch lachashecha v'lo karmu peneim." If you put the bread inside the tanur right before Shabbat, and it's not nikram panav yet, hasn't gotten to this level of baking, im bemezid asur ad motzei Shabbat. If you did it knowingly that you're not allowed to do this, then you cannot benefit from it until motzei Shabbat plus the time that it takes to bake. So, for instance, if it takes half an hour, 45 minutes to bake, motzei Shabbat after Avdalah, you have to wait half an hour, 45 minutes before you could eat it. Ve'im b'shogeg, but if you did it b'shogeg, then im en lo ma yochal, if you don't have anything else to eat, mutar lo lirdot mimenu mazon shalosh seudot. You could take the food for your seudot Shabbat. Ve'omer la'acharim she'en lahem ma yochlu, bo'u urdu lachem mazon shalosh seudot. And if there are many more breads than your need, you could tell people who don't have anything else to eat also to come and help themselves from the tanur and take it out. Now here we have an issue of rediat apat, which is a isur darabanan. To take bread off of the tanur is a isur darabanan. So here, if you have nothing else to eat, fine, you could do it, and even then, you should not do it like darko. You should not do it with a mardeh, which would be a long stick attached to a piece that would, take the bread off the tanur. You should not do it with that. Ela besakin, you stick a knife or a fork inside and you pull it off in a not normal manner. You don't want it to be uvdin dechol. That's why it's mashma from Maran. If you can't do it with a change like we mentioned, then you could do it with its actual kli as well, with a mardeh as well. But if you put it early enough that by the time Shkia came, it was already baked on its face enough, then kevan de lo avar isur, because you didn't do any isur, and you need it for Shabbat, it's sorech Shabbat, rodeh kedarko, you could do it like it would be done normally, v'shelo lesorech hayom asur afilu b'shinui, and things that you don't need is not a necessity of the Sudat Shabbat, you can't do even with a shinui. So now we have to study what that exactly means. So it says the Mishna Berura, beshogeg. This, that if you did it beshogeg, you could eat it when you don't have anything else to eat. The reason we don't knas you, we don't fine you, we just had mamash in Siman Reshnun Gimal, and we're going to have it here in our Siman also upcoming again, that we do give fine to people who make mistakes, even b'shogeg, when they transgress Shabbat, that they cannot use it because we are choshesh that they're going to do b'mezid and say it was b'shogeg and so on. This is what we had before as well. So the reason that we don't do that here is because kevan de'en lo pat acher lechol, there's nothing else to eat. You can't do the Seudot of Shabbat without bread, Shari, therefore, we do not impose too many restrictions midrabanan on him to make a kenas. We let him go. Aval tafshil and hayuv kol kach lechol b'Shabbat. Later on in Shulchan Aruch is talking about cooked items that you don't have, as long as you have pat, you don't have an obligation to eat tafshil on Shabbat. Therefore, we impose more restrictions on that, lest people come to do it and say, "Oh, I was b'shogeg," So we don't let that happen. But by bread, if you don't let him, he's not going to have su'udah. There's nothing else. Even if he eats rice and stew and other things, still was not mekayem su'udat Shabbat. You need su'udat pat. You need bread. So therefore, we're more lenient. If he has nothing else to eat, if he only has that food, that pot, that he left b'shogeg, then it's mutar lo leochlo. It's mutar. She'asu leit'anot b'Shabbat, because you can't fast on Shabbat. According to Rashba, the Magen Avraham brings the Rashba that not eat on Shabbat, fasting on Shabbat is a isur d'oraita. כמו שכתוב סימן רש בחת. You're going to get there, בעזרת השם. ולפי זה, דכל ההתר הוא מפני שאין לו פת אחר לאכול. Because the entire heter is built upon the fact that you have nothing else to eat, אפילו בתנורים שלנו שמועד לקמם בסעיף זין שאין בהם משום רדיעה. Even in our tanurim, גם כן אסור להסתפק מן הפת יותר משלוש סעודות. You can't take bread out of our tanurim if they were baked on Shabbat. Either if it's not for the absolute necessity of the 3 sudot of Shabbat. Fine. Now, what does it mean? Mazon shalosh sudot, the amount that you need for 3 sudot of Shabbat. It says the Mishna Berura, ve'im bepat echad she'otzi yesh bo k'tei shalosh sudot. We don't care about lechem mishneh and shalem, none of those. If you have a large challah over there in the oven that has enough for 3 sudot, right? You have to have kabetza, bread, zayit or kabetza of bread for every suda. If you have 3 of those in one pat, you're good to go, right? You don't take anything more. Shuv asur livdot. Afal gav de'en lo lekol suda kikar shalem, even though that you're not going to have a full bread for every suda, and certainly you're not going to have lechem mishneh, it's going to be fine. Because again, you're going against an isur. So whatever is a necessity, you could do. Whatever is a mitzvah, min hamuvchar, but it's not a necessity, you're not allowed to do, because who says that that's going to bend back the isur? Now, yirteh b'mardeh, this that you could take it off with the special vessel that's made for taking bread off the tanur, the rdiyat pat, lo ve'eshemut gamur, is not a full-fledged isur. The Rabbanan, the Gemara calls the chokhmah, right? And it's uvdin dechol, basically, right? And therefore, any place that that's possible to make a change and to do it with shinui, we require you to do it with shinui. If you can't do it with shinui, it's too far from hand's reach, you have to do it with this long vessel, then we let you do it, because it's not a melacha, it's a chokhmah. Therefore, that will be allowed. And when it says rodek darko, the Mishna Berura brings the machloket achronim. The Eliyahu Rabbah says you have to be machmir on this, that even if you put it beheter, still you have to do it beshinui, because at the end of the day, rediyah is something that we don't want to allow without shinui. But if it is sealed, we already mentioned that we're not hoshesh, that the person comes to stoke the fire.